right. Well, that was a great update from Preston and Christy. I can tell you, Preston and I have worked side by side in our roles here at the church for over 7 years, and I can just see through video the impact that sabbatical has had for him, and it's good. It's good. And so look forward to his return next Sunday. Like we said, plan on staying after. He will be here. The family will be here in the fellowship hall. You'll have the opportunity to shake hands, hug necks, and let them know how much you miss them. That's next Sunday. Today, however, we are wrapping up our series. We've been in this series called The Ways of the Wise. And just to recap, if this is your first time, we'll try to fill you in so you're not completely lost. But we've established this series 4 weeks ago with the premise that wisdom is doing the right thing in the right way at the right time. And if you have your fill in the blank, you probably already filled that out because we've said it every single week to hammer it home. So the right thing in the right way at the right time. Week 1. We established 2 types of wisdom. We said there's earthly wisdom and there is godly wisdom. And as Christ followers, it's important to know which one we're leaning on and which one we are pulling from. And then week 2, we looked at how that's revealed through our words and the things that come out of our mouth. And we said that godly wisdom enables us to use our words to build and bless other people. Not to destroy and tear down, but to build and bless others in a godly way. And last weekend, Davey taught us that wisdom demands a response, and that wise people are not just hearers of the word, but they are doers of the word. They put that into action, and it shows through the things that they do. And the week before, it taught us that it shows through the things that they say. Today, it's going to be something that hits home for every single one of us. James is not going to let us off the hook. In fact, he's going to hit us with a hammer and then keep going. It's going to hurt a little bit. So just a heads up, it's not going to be that, uplifting and inspiring, man, let's go, conquer the world type of message. But it's going to be good. It's going to be good for all of us. What the issue that James is going to tackle this morning is that of conflict. How we fight, when we fight, why we fight, and how to do it as a Christ follower. What to do when the heat starts rising. So, to get us going, I figured I would go back 23 years to my childhood and tell you about the most traumatic, hilarious, and I guess also slightly violent moment of my childhood. It started one summer evening when my brother and I were home. I, like many kids in the 90s and early 2000s, loved watching Walker, Texas Ranger. Chuck Norris. Any Walker, Texas Ranger fans? Yes. So Chuck Norris. You don't cross him. You don't mess with him. So Chuck Norris was one of my favorite TV shows, and like I said, every young boy's dream. I was about 12 years old at the time. My little brother, Shadow is his name, so when I say that, that's his name, his real name, okay? So Shadow and I were staying home together. He was about 7 or 8. Okay, so kind of paint the scene. Mom and dad are off to work because it's summertime. Me and my brother home alone. Now, back in that day, again, this is like the 90s, there was not DVR, there was not YouTube, there was not Netflix or anything on demand, okay? Which that meant that if you wanted to watch something that was coming on TV, like Walker, Texas Ranger, then you had to know what time it came on, and you had to be in front of the TV, turn to that channel, and watch it. Otherwise, you missed it, and you had to wait for the reruns, okay? I know, totally different world. Why would people do that? I don't know. But we've come a long way since then. Okay, so it's getting close to Walker, Texas Ranger time, 11 a.m., and so I'm getting excited, and the clock strikes 11. I grab the remote, and I switch it from whatever silly cartoon Shadow was watching. Let's say it's Rugrats or something. I switch it from that to Walker, Texas Ranger. And in that moment, I didn't know, but I saw my life flash before my eyes because Shadow snapped. He was not having this Walker, Texas Ranger stuff. And so I, being the older brother, I take off running from him, okay? So I'm running through the kitchen, and at this house, we had a game room area that was like a garage that was enclosed, and so I'm running in the game room, and he's hot on my heels. He's chasing me right behind me, so I quickly run. I dodge him, juke him, right? I didn't know I had those type of moves until that moment. I juke him, I get around him, and I go back through the kitchen to the living room, and there in the living room, we had a cordless phone. We were high-tech back in the day. It looked something like this, okay? Not a sleek iPhone, but it was a cordless phone. It was like a brick, the shape of a brick, and it weighed about, I don't know, 12 or 15 pounds. And so I grabbed that phone because I'm realizing, man, my brother is going to get me. He's not happy about this TV situation. So I've got to call mom. Okay, that's my only hope. So I grabbed the phone. Now I'm running down the other end of our house, down the hallway, and I end up dialing mom's number, and I get it up to my ear, and she answers, and I get 3 words out. Mom, Shadow is. And that's it. Shadow had now wrestled the phone out of my hand and took off running. So now he's running back to the kitchen. Meanwhile, I'm screaming, Shadow, stop, Shadow, Shadow. And mom's hearing all this through the phone, and she's like, boys, stop. And now we're back to the kitchen. Shadow turns around, hurls the phone, and it's going through the air, and it hits me right here in the forehead, and I go down. Just like it's David and Goliath, but little brother edition. The phone falls down, the batteries come out, I'm now bleeding. My mom, obviously worried because, like, what happened? The phone disconnected, and we didn't put it back together and ended up calling her. And so she took lunch, took off the rest of the day, came home and settled the great TV dispute of the century. Now, here's the thing about that. That fight is silly, right? It's more than just cartoons and Chuck Norris, Walker, Texas Ranger, all of that. There was a lot more to that silly little 8-year-old and 12-year-old fight. It was about control. It was about desire. And what you're going to see today in our passage from James chapter 4, by the way, it's about this simple truth that is at the heart of every single conflict, whether you're 8 years old in here today or whether you're 80 years old here today. And James chapter 4 is going to cover that. Now, let's be honest. Anytime we're in conflict, our instinct and everything within us tells us, hey, stand your ground, prove your point, make them pay, because earthly wisdom tells us to protect our pride and to justify our actions and to make sure that the other person knows that they were wrong. What we're going to see today, obviously the comparing and contrast, there's the earthly wisdom, but what godly wisdom is going to do in James chapter 4 is it's going to flip that script completely. And it's going to say this: when it comes to conflict, when it comes to problems, when it comes to things like that in your relationships, what is usually the most natural thing to do is almost certainly the least wise. Almost certainly the least wise things to do. And if we are going to be different, if we're going to be men and women of God who follow godly wisdom, pursue that, then we've got to learn how to respond differently. And so here's the question I want you and I to wrestle with this morning, and that is this: what causes conflict in your life, in your relationships? What causes that tension, that friction? And how does a wise person respond to that? How do they respond differently than the world does? Last week, you may remember, or a couple of weeks ago, I said we choose whether or not we follow Jesus, but then once we choose and make that decision, we don't get to choose what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what it reacts like. So, that, I believe that what we are going to cover today has the potential to radically shape and change your lives and your relationships. Now, before we get to James 4, I want to go back to week 1 real quick to set the foundation for where we're going to pick up in James chapter 4. In James chapter 3, he said this, and we read this 4 weeks ago. He asked this question. He says, "Who is wise and understanding among you?" Now, when James is saying that, he's not asking somebody to raise their hand. This was a letter that's written to churches. It's going to be read throughout the area of Judea. And so he's asking this question: who is wise and understanding among you? Right? Who understands doing the right thing at the right time in the right way? Wisdom is about insight, right? And so wise people understand that life is connected, and what happened yesterday impacts today, and what happens today impacts tomorrow and the future, and so on, because life is connected. And so James is saying, look, who is wise and understanding among you? Who can keep things in perspective? And then he's going to ask it, or he's going to follow up with this. He says, if you think you are that wise man, that wise woman, then here's how I'm going to know. And look at what he said. He said, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. Because this is important, wise people understand this simple truth. And that is this. It's basically the premise of today is that wise people walk in humility every single day. Every day, every time, in every way, wise people walk in humility. Arrogance just doesn't make sense. It flies in the face of everything that we know about how the world works. And so he says, if you think you are wise, then show it by the way that you live and by your good deeds done in humility. And then, it's like he pauses, he finishes chapter 3. It wasn't chapters at the time, it was a letter, but he finishes it, and then it's like he takes this break, takes this breather, and then he's like, let's see how this can be applicable in their life. Let's try to really hit home with what I just said about wisdom, walking in humility. And that's where we pick up in chapter 4 today, is James chapter 4, verse 1. It's going to be on the screen. If you don't mind reading the translation with me that is on the screen, we're going to read verse 1 together. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Let's stop right there. Now, this is a shift here, because James has now shifted from this setup to now an application here, and it's a fascinating question. I don't know if you caught this, but verse 1, he says, what causes fights among you? Now, if you're like me, that's where I want to push back a little bit against James and say, time out, James. You got it wrong there, buddy. I know the answer to that question, what causes fights, and it's not a what, it's a who. And it's the person sitting right next to me. Some of you are like, nope, can't do that. We walking home. It's my spouse, because they don't think about my feelings or my needs. Or we say it's not a what, it's a who, or it's a you. It's you, boss, who doesn't think about the implications of your decisions and how that impacts me, and you never seem to appreciate my efforts unless something is wrong. That's the only time you want to talk to me. It's you, boss, or it's you, child. You ungrateful, think you're smarter than the world, but you haven't even finished Algebra 1 yet. But somehow the world revolves around you, child. It's you, or it's you, mom and dad, because you try to control me too much. Or it's you, dude, who cut me off in traffic with that jacked up pickup truck that makes me upset because you now think that you own the roadway and that the laws that apply to everybody else somehow don't apply to you. Or it's you, grocery store clerk, because could you possibly go any slower bagging my groceries? You are wasting my time. I've got places to be and people to see. Or it's you, mom, of one of the girls in my daughter's class, who thinks that somehow your kid is better than everyone else and that you're the only person that knows how to parent. It's you. And James hears all of that, and he responds gently but directly. He says, no, it's not a what, it's not a who. I didn't make a mistake. It's not who, it's a what. And again, if you're like me, that's where I want to push back and say, the problem is not a what, it's out there. Because if they would change, then everything would be good. If they would solve this or fix this or not do this, then I would not have this problem in my life. And what James is doing today is he's going to flip that spotlight around into a mirror and show us that indeed there is an issue. Because as long as you are convinced that the issue is there, and as long as we are pointing fingers there, then we're never going to deal with the what inside of us. We'll never deal with the deeper issues that live inside of you until you do like James says and deal with this what. So James says that source, the source, rather, of your conflict with your spouse, the source of the conflict with your child, the source of the conflict with your boss, your coworker, your friend, whatever it may be, is the war that's happening inside of you. Put up the rest of verse 1. He says, within you, the battle within you. So, the unmet desire, the frustrated expectations, the longing for approval, and the craving to be right. He says, doesn't that all come from within? In other words, this is huge. In other words, there is something that you want and you are not getting. Let that sink in. James says there is something that you want, you're not getting, and that's the source of the conflict. Something that I want, I'm not getting, and that's the source. That desire, James says, that desire left unchecked begins to drive your emotions. It begins to distort your entire perspective about a situation, and it damages your relationships. And so, again, what causes fights? Because it's not a who, it's a what. And the powerful truth that James is pointing out here is that the source of most conflict is not out there, but it stems and it starts inside, which is our first point, if you have to follow along, is that outside fights stem from inside turmoil. I deliberately use that word turmoil because James said it's a war. It's this battle within your own heart that these conflicts and that these disagreements and that all of this stems from. He says, you desire, this is verse 2, he says, you desire, but you do not have, so you kill and you covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. Man, is this guy like reading our mail or what? He says, so you have conflict because somebody is keeping you from something that you want. Because they're keeping you from something that you desire and that you want, your anger burns at them. You resent them because of this. And James says you even want to murder them. Now, remember, this letter is to church people, and so it's not literal murder here, although it can lead to that. It is metaphorical murder, right? You murder that relationship. You murder with your silence. You murder with all of these actions and things that you do surrounding that. And so he says the rage comes from the fact that this person simply kept you from something that you wanted. Now, think about this. It happens in the simplest of ways. If you've been on a plane, a crowded flight, and you're just lucky enough to have an empty seat between you and the next person, and plane's starting to fill up, and getting to the end, not a lot of people coming on the plane, and you start thinking, what? Man, I hope this seat's empty. Right? Like, man, wouldn't it be nice to have this extra space and nobody's sitting here beside me? And then what happens is they're just about to close the doors, and this one person comes in, and they're like, they got all these bags and all this stuff, and they're dragging everything, and they come and they say, excuse me, can I sit down? So in that moment, there's like this little resentment that starts rising up against this person. Now, they didn't do anything except take their seat on the plane, right? But simply the fact that you had a desire, pointing out it started with a desire that there's a chance this seat could be empty. Oh my goodness, this is going to be an awesome flight. And now this person comes in and they like burst your bubble because they're sitting in their seat. So what started just as a simple desire can escalate much, much quicker than we think, because it's just something that we wanted that we are not getting. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, hold on, wait a minute, Pastor. Wait a minute. Time out. They really did me wrong. You're saying, this person, my husband, acted selfishly. My husband cheated on me. Quick note. Did y'all see the TikTok thing this week? Oh, my goodness. Sorry. Anyways, let's move on. The CEO. It's like, okay. Anyways, sorry, I got sidetracked. You're like, Pastor, they really did do me wrong. They cheated on me. This person genuinely disrespected, or they stole this from me. They deprived me of something that I deserved. And James, what he's going to do is he's not going to deny that. But what he's going to do is he's going to say, yes, I understand that, but the rage, the conflict simply came because they kept you from something that you wanted. He makes it super elementary. I wanted respect, and I didn't get it from them, which, again, I know how you respond. You respond much like how I respond. I earned it. I earned respect. I earned whatever it is. And I would say, yes, you earned it, and you didn't get what you earned, right? No. And so, therefore, you didn't get what you wanted. Or they promised, and they didn't keep their promise, right? So you wanted them to keep their promise. Right. They didn't keep their promise, so you didn't get what you wanted. Yeah. Or it wasn't fair what that person did. I know, and you wanted what was fair, right? Yes, I want what's fair, and you're not getting what's fair, are you? No, so you're not getting what you wanted. In the heat of the moment, when frustration is rising, if we just pause, I think what James is saying here is if we could just say this thing, if we could just come to the point where we say, hey, you know what? You know what part of the problem is here? It's real simple. I'm not getting what I want. This could be life-changing for some people in the room. To grasp hold of this concept and to say it out loud. You know what part of the problem is? It boils down to I'm just not getting what I want in this situation. What I wanted, what I desired from you in this outcome. So, because I think this is such a good statement, I figured we could practice saying this. So, if you would, humor me, at least, for the next 30 seconds. If we can say this statement together. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. You know what part of the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. Very good. Now, just to make sure your spouse did it, we're going to do guys and we're going to do girls, okay? That way we have practice for in the car ride home and when we get home. All right, so guys, hang with me. Here we go. You ready? 1, 2, 3. You know what part of the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. Very good. Some of you are still like this. That's okay. Ladies, you ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. You know what part of the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. Very good. So James takes us to elementary school and says, hey, the source of your quarrels, the source of your conflict is simply boiled down to this simple truth. And when you say that, think about this. There's no comeback to that. Like, what are you supposed to say if somebody says that to you? You're like going back and forth, and they're like, hey, time out. You know, part of the problem is here, I'm just not getting what I want from you. They're going to be like, okay. What do they say there? It's disarming. It's humbling, right? And yes, you may still be upset. You might still want change, but something powerful happens in your heart when you simply admit, hey, I have a desire, and that desire is not being met. Now, quick little caveat. I've got to throw this in there. There are people who are skilled manipulators, right? And through things and tactics like gaslighting and victim shaming can cover up their abusive, manipulative behaviors by always making you feel like their abuse or their sin is somehow your fault. I'm not talking about that, using this in that context. If that is you, then I would advise seeing a Christian counselor. I'm talking about in the context of normal, day-to-day, rumble-tumble disagreement, saying, hey, time out. You know what? I'm just not getting what I want here. It breathed life into a conversation that was going the wrong way. Now, check this out. James gets deeper. He says, the simple fact that you're not getting what you want points to the presence of two things in your heart. This is about to get real deep. Okay? The first one, he says, that simple truth points to the fact of two things within your heart. You may not even know that they were there. But the first one is idolatry. And the second one is a lack of trust in God. Now, this could unlock the door in your understanding of your own heart and why relationships often go sideways. He says, the key word is in verse 2, where he says, covet. He says, you covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You covet and cannot attain, so you fight and quarrel. So what is coveting? Let's define what that is. I'm going to put it on the screen. Coveting is this. I want something so badly that I think there is no way that I can be happy or content without it. Simply put. That's what it is. And so it's not that the desires are wrong in and of themselves. We have a desire for someone to be on time or to be less selfish or more thoughtful or more attentive. Those are all legitimate. Okay, James isn't knocking that and saying that those are bad desires. Those are decent things. But when our demands become, or when our desires become demands, these cravings that control our whole attitude and outlook and situation and how we feel about others, that's when it's crossed the line into this. Coveting has become a kind of idolatry, which defining that is something that you require, that is something besides God, to be happy, satisfied, and content. And so, simply put, it's where you believe that you need this thing or this state of things in order to be happy, satisfied, and content in your life. And without them, it's not going to go well for you or the people in relationship with you. So here's the question. What is that thing? What is the thing that you want bad enough that you are willing to tune out, yell at, abuse, or neglect to get? What is that thing? Is it respect? Is it admiration? Is it recognition? What is that thing that if people don't give you, you respond in this manner? And James says, this points to the presence of an idol. And that is the real source of your conflict. If you're like me, I don't like that. Right? Can we just be honest? That's not fun. That's not fun to hear because it is so much easier to point the fingers out there instead of examine my own heart. It's so much easier to cast blame for my actions on someone else instead of being accountable for my actions and taking responsibility. And James sees right through us and he doesn't let us off the hook. In fact, St. Augustine put it this way: emotions like rage or bitterness function like smoke from a fire. You can follow the trail of smoke back down to the fires in your heart, and they are usually fires that you have built in worship of an idol. If I was to get home and my house was filled with smoke in the living room, do you think I would walk in and say, "Hey kids, there's smoke everywhere. Open the windows and turn on the fans," and sit down and turn on the TV? No. That's the last thing I would do, right? So what he's saying here is that this is a symptom. These things are simply symptoms of something within that is going on, right? It's smoke from a fire within your heart. That there is a real problem, that there is a real issue there. Don't just get rid of the smoke. Deal with the heart issue, right? Seek and find what is really going on in there. And at the end of verse 2, he says, "You do not have because you do not ask." And so the first problem that we have is that we have made the wrong person responsible for our needs, right? Looking to someone else or something else to supply only what God can supply. And two, our horizontal conflicts with people are a result of a vertical disruption here. Okay, our horizontal conflicts here are a result of a vertical disruption here. These don't go well because we don't trust God here, that he can be the all-sufficient one, supplying our source of everything. A well-known speaker once said this at a conference that I heard. He says, "Has it ever occurred to you that what you crave, you're not getting because you're trying to squeeze it out of someone who doesn't have it?" Meaning this, that you want control, you want respect, you want significance, you want satisfaction, you want approval, you want belonging, you want all of these things. What if the primary source of all of that was supposed to be God? Now you're trying to squeeze it out of someone that cannot supply that thing for you. Essentially trusting in other things instead of God. And James, he continues, I love this. He says, "You don't have because you don't ask. When you do ask, you don't receive because you have wrong motives." And then in verse 4, he says, "You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity with God?" You adulterous people. He's literally name calling here. I'm like, hold on, James, pump the brakes. Which brings me to my second point, and that is this, that we can't love God, and that's for you to fill in. That blank is for you to fill in. What is it that there's this battle going on? You want this from your relationships and you're not getting it. And James is calling that and putting it on the table and saying that's the thing that is the source of conflicts in your life. Pride, validation, respect, whatever it may be. And he uses this language of adultery because it's not just conflicts with people, it's because we have a divided heart with God. He's saying you want control and you want God. You want Jesus and you want comfort. You want faith and you want selfishness. And James says it just simply doesn't work that way. That's why you're having so much conflict. The deeper issue is that when we ask God for something, our happiness shouldn't depend on that. That's why he uses this language of adulterer, because it's literally like the thing, the source of everything we're supposed to be going to God for, but yet we're now asking God, hey, give me more money, give me this raise, give me this, give me this. And we find our contentment and our happiness in that instead of God. And so he's like, you're asking God for things to give you that's going to take his place. Not that those desires are wrong. But when they become the end-all, be-all, and the source of our contentment and happiness and satisfaction in life, that's where it has crossed the line, James is saying. So what is it that you want bad enough that you're willing to yell at, tune out, abuse, or neglect to get? And so what's the solution here? He's going to give us some solutions. In verses 6 through 10, he's going to lay it out. He's been hammering it on us for the first few verses. He's going to shift, and he's going to say this. In verse 6, he says, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Now, proud and pride, that's never fun to talk about, but let's do it for just a quick second here. Pride isn't a sin among many sins. It is the seedbed of all sins. What does that mean? James is simply pointing out that the root of all of your problems, the root of all of your conflict and issues, all comes down to pride. St. Augustine put it this way. He said, pride is pregnant with all possible sin. Pride is. Trace your resentment, your anger, your unforgiveness, your jealousy, all of these things you can trace back, and the root of it is pride. Proverbs puts it this way. In Proverbs 13, he says, where there is strife, or conflict, another words for that, where there is any conflict with another person or with God, there is pride. So if we're going to deal with the root of our conflict, then we've got to deal with our own pride. Because he's pointing that out. He says, pride is the source of all of this. Now, let's be honest. Pride is very, very, very hard to spot, okay? It's kind of like bad breath. You're the last person to know that you have it, usually. Everyone else knows, but you don't know that you have bad breath, unless they give you a med. They're kind. Just take it as a compliment, I guess. So I figured we would do a little self-checkup here today. It's not scientific, but it is probably annoyingly accurate. And so we're going to put up 10 questions on the screen. And it is this. This is called the pride test. So you can kind of follow along, keep score in your head. The first one is this. Are you easily offended? And you're just going to say yes or no in your head. Please say it in your head. Are you easily offended? Do you have a hard time admitting when you're wrong? Do you interrupt more than you listen? Are you more aware of others' faults than your own? Do you feel the need to always win? Do you feel overlooked often? Are you constantly needing to explain or defend yourself? Do you regularly feel entitled to more than you have? Do you struggle to apologize first? And do you believe that the problem is almost always them? So, let's see how we did. Okay, now it's time for the scoring. So, if you scored 1 through 10, you were prideful. Congratulations. Okay, that's a 1 through 10. You're prideful. Now, if you scored a 0, anybody scored a 0 in the house, you are very prideful. So, now, here's the thing. Verse 6, it's the hinge of this whole passage, okay? He says, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. He gives grace to the humble. This is the turning point. That little phrase, he gives grace, is hope for you and for me. That's where we find our hope, because some of us, maybe we walked in with the weight of a fight, the weight of a grudge, the weight of a cycle, the weight of a pattern of pride that you just keep rotating in. And God's word to you this morning is simply this: there is grace. There is grace. There's more grace than your pride. There's more grace than your past. There's more grace than your last outburst. There's more grace than your shame. There's more grace than all of that. Yes, it's true. God opposes the proud. That's a warning. But God gives grace to the humble. That is a promise that you can take to the bank. And that's our last point, that a humble heart receives God's grace, greater grace. A humble heart receives God's greater grace. So if you are tired of fighting and tired of pushing back, you don't have to fix it all. You just have to bow. Because here is something. I've said you can take it to the bank. Here it is. You can know that you know, that you know, that you know, that you know, that God meets humility with grace every single time. Every time. James wraps up. He says, submit yourselves unto God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. So I want to leave you with 4 very quick applicational points. We're going to fly through these. But how can you do better in life and relationship with your spouse, boss, whatever? 4 quick applicational points. The first one is this: overlook what you can. Overlook what you can. Proverbs puts it this way: it is to a man's glory to overlook an offense. A person's wisdom yields patience, and it's to a man's glory to overlook an offense. Not everything has to be a battle. Not everything has to be fought about. It can simply be, I'm moving on. I disagree, but I'm moving on. Number 2, listen more than you speak. Proverbs tells us, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is to his folly and shame. So don't just wait for your turn to talk. Listen to understand, and listen more than you speak. Number 3, own your part. Jesus tells us in Matthew, remove the log from your own eye. What did we practice earlier? We said, you know what part of the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. Own that, recognize it, acknowledge. I'll pause right there and say that can be hard because it feels like you're giving up leverage. It feels like you're letting them have the leverage, letting them off the hook. But again, that's not trusting God, because what did God say? Where there is humility, when a person humbles themselves, what is there every single time? His grace, right? So if you believe that, if you trust that, you won't have a problem dealing with this. And then last thing, ask forgiveness and offer it. Ephesians tells us, be kind, forgiving one another just as Christ forgives us. Those are some quick action steps that you can do this week. I want to close by going back to verse 4. I didn't really talk about this much, but it was verse 4, and it said this: do you not know that friendship with the world means enmity against God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. I want to leave you with this visual. So, oftentimes, following Jesus, following Christ, can feel a lot like tug of war. Feel a lot like the game tug of war, where, let's be honest, on Sunday, what about now? Yeah. So on Sundays, it's friendship with God, and everything is going well because I'm at church, all is well. But then I get back to work on Monday or back to school, whatever it may be, and then it's like, I forgot about all that, and I'm doing the things of the world and everything that the world has to offer. Or maybe you're like Paul in Romans 7, where in Romans chapter 7, Paul says, man, the things that I want to do, I don't do. I want to do this, but I end up doing the things that I don't want to do. And the things that I don't want to do, I end up doing even more. And so you feel like you're just tossed back and forth between being a friend of God and being a friend of the world, and chasing godly wisdom versus earthly wisdom. So there's this back and forth, but I think what James would have us recognize and realize this morning is that you're not just simply a victim that's being tossed, innocent victim being tossed back and forth in this tug of war. You have a choice. You have a choice, man of God. You have a choice, woman of God. Which one are you going to pursue? And honestly, I feel like many of us, we've built idols over here. Idols of comfort and idols of control and idols seeking applause and approval from other people and status and recognition and all of that. And we're hoping that somehow God will bless us because of that and participate in our idolatry and adultery, as he called it out in James chapter 4. There's no wonder our heart is at war. On the other side, it's pulling us towards God, humility and repentance and surrender, a life where you stop reaching for the world's approval and reaching for all of the things from the world, and you start drawing near to the one that already knows you and the one that already loves you and sees you and calls you his own. Every response, every reaction, and every desire is either pulling you towards the world or it's drawing you closer to God. Church, how beautiful it is. How beautiful it is when we are going this way when our feet are dug in and we are seeking all of these things to give us value, we have a jealous God, like it says in verse 4, and he is constantly pursuing us. He's constantly reaching us, and he never lets go. Thank you, guys. So, the question for you, for me, is when you don't get what you want, which way are you pulling? Do you run this way? Or do you do like James says, and he concluded this passage, he says, draw near to God. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Humble yourself and draw near to him. I've said it before. We don't get to choose what it's like to follow Jesus. He defined that for us. And so this week, when you feel angry, bitter, humble yourself, and say, hey, you know what part of the problem is? I'm simply not getting what I want. Let that bring humility into the room. Let it open the door for healing. And then ask yourself, hey, where does this point to idolatry in my heart? What is it that I'm craving and wanting so bad that I'm willing to yell at, to fight, to tune out, to abuse, or neglect to get? And here's the good news. God doesn't stand at a distance telling us, hey, just figure it out. He draws near to the humble, and he gives more grace. And how do we receive that grace? We simply humble ourselves. We lay down our pride and we surrender. Because the wisest thing you can do is not win an argument, but to walk in humility like Jesus, which is our example. When we talk about humility, you can't look any further than the cross, right? Jesus, being the one who had the right to demand everything, chose to kneel. He left heaven's glory and entered into our broken world. Took on flesh, took on a cross, and laid down his life for sinners like you and like I. Why did he do that? Why did Jesus leave heaven for us? Look up. If you're not paying attention, look up. Let me tell you, why did Jesus leave heaven? Because there was a conflict far greater than one you may have with your spouse, or you may have with your coworker, or you may have with your boss or your friend. There was a conflict far, far greater. And it was a conflict between you and God. Sin, it didn't just create tension between you and God. It created a canyon, a separation that we could never cross on our own. But Jesus, he came to resolve our greatest conflict. And he made peace through his blood, Scripture tells us. He took the punishment that you and I deserved. And so today, we're going to close out our time with the Lord's Supper, communion. That's what it's also known as. We come humbled, we come desperate, we come grateful because Christ ended the war between us and he made a way for grace. And so what's going to happen is at this time, we have a couple of our deacons that are going to be coming down the center aisles. And if you did not have the opportunity to get communion elements as you came in, just simply slip up your hand and they will make sure that you get served communion at this time. We'll have a little bit of time to do that. While they're doing that, I'll tell you that communion is a time of reflection. It's a moment to realign our hearts around our desire, not around our desires rather, but around the grace of Jesus Christ. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're invited to join us. And if you're not, I invite you to observe, reflect on what it means to receive that kind of grace that only Jesus